Look, are we streaming yet? Oh, we are. Are we good to go, Amanda?
Mr. Chairman, you're live on YouTube. You're good to go.
Very good. Meeting of Labor and Health will come to order this morning. We have 3 bills before us this morning. Welcome to Labor and Health. I see some familiar faces. I see part of your faces. I don't see all your faces. You can see ours, but we can't see yours. That's fair. First bill we have on consideration this morning is Senate File 104. I would remind those who are in Zoom land to be sure when you do your testimony, introduce yourselves, tell us who you represent. And we have a hard time seeing your names on the screen because of all the plexiglass. So be sure and tell us real loud and clear who you are and who you represent. Senate File 104, Senator Pappas, front and center, sir. Welcome. I hear this is your favorite committee.
Thank you, committee. Stephen Pappas, District 7.
One second, Senator Pappas. I just got reminded by my much more astute committee member. We need to do roll call real quick, if you would, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Bouchard.
Here.
Senator Furphy. Here. Senator Hutchins.
Hutchins.
Senator Hutchins. Senator McCune.
Here.
Chairman Baldwin.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, we're all here, all accounted for. Senator Pappas, go ahead and lead us through this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. Since I spent 2 years with this body, I actually missed the shining faces, and so I'm glad to be before you again. Thank you. Today, I bring to you a bill, Senate File 104, Anesthesiologist Assistants. This was a bill that actually came before the House last year, but being a budget session, it failed on introduction. And so this year we're bringing it back to your attention, and hopefully we can move it through the body this year. What I'll do first is just give you some information about anesthesiologist assistants and what they do. Probably the bill itself is typically a licensure bill, much like many others. So I don't intend to, it's fairly lengthy. It's 26 pages, but I don't intend to go through it line by line. I'll go through it real fast when we get to it. But for the most part, I think that with my introductory statements and then statements from people here who are here to testify, I think you'll get the gist of everything that will be in the bill anyhow.
Perfect. We appreciate that brevity. And
Thank
for those
you.
that are familiar, actually, this follows very closely the Physician Assistant Act. It's very, very similar, if not identical. So, yeah, if a committee has questions about something specific, we'll ask you, Senator Pappas.
Okay, thank
Proceed.
you. Okay, anesthesiologist assistant, which will be probably referred to by people as AAs, is a skilled person qualified by advanced academic and clinical education to provide anesthetic care under the direction of a qualified physician anesthesiologist. The physician anesthesiologist who is responsible for the AA is available to prescribe and direct particular therapeutic interventions in the operating room and the intensive care setting. By virtue of basic science education and clinical practice experience, the AA is skilled in the use of contemporary state-of-the-art patient monitoring techniques in anesthesia care environments. They perform complementary and supplementary anesthetic care and monitoring tasks that allow the directing physician anesthesiologist to use his or her own skills more efficiently and effectively. Some of the duties that an AA would do would be to gather patient data, to assist in the evaluation of patients' physical and mental status, to record the surgical procedures planned, and to help the directing physician anesthesiologist administer the therapeutic plan that has been formulated for the anesthetic care of the patient. The tasks formed by AAs reflect regional variations in aesthetic anesthesia practice and state regulatory factors. Additional duties include pre-testing anesthesia delivery systems and patient monitoring and operating special monitors and support devices for critical cardiac, pulmonary, and neurological systems. They may be involved in operations of bedside electronic computer-based monitors and have supervisory responsibilities for laboratory functions associated with anesthesia and operating room care. They provide cardiopulmonary resuscitation in association with other anesthesia care team members and in accordance with approved emergency protocols. Education requires a post BA degree, and that degree is typically 24 to 28 months in length, depending on the school. These two-year programs focus on coursework that enhances the basic science knowledge in physiology, pharmacology, anatomy, and biochemistry, with special emphasis on cardiovascular, respiratory, renal, nervous, and neuromuscular systems. So, and part of that, there is a clinical portion as well. The clinical part of their training provides experience in patient monitoring, anesthesia delivery systems, life support systems, and patient assistance assessments, and the skills needed to provide compassionate and quality care. During this clinical portion, students administer a minimum of 600 different anesthetics during a variety of surgeries. Prerequisite to that is as I said, a undergraduate pre-medical background. And the pre-medical courses include biology, chemistry, physics, and math. Although any baccalaureate major is acceptable, majors typically are biology, chemistry, and physics, math, computer science, or one of the allied health professions such as respiratory therapy and medical technology or nursing. There is a certification process, a national certification process, the National Commission for Certification of Anesthesiologist Assistants, which was founded back in 1989, provides certification for AAs in the United States. The commission includes physician anesthesiologists and anesthesiologist assistants. It contracts with the National Board of Medicine examiners to assist with the certification process, including task analysis, development, and contact grids, item writing, editing, and administering of exams. And they do have a requirement for continuing education. And unlike a lot of professions, they even require examinations at periodic times, additional examinations. So with that, I think I'll let the public and others speak, and then if you want, we can go back and work the bill. It's up to you, Jerry.
Very, very good. We'll go ahead and let's hear from the public, and then we'll bring you back for a wrap up before we work the bill.
Sounds good, Mr.
Oh, we got a question for you before you run away. Go ahead, Senator Hutchins.
Just quickly, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that. Senator Pappas, if you would, quickly go over the oppositions to this bill. So hopefully if the public has any opposition, they'll understand, and hopefully we won't have to address those, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Pappas, proceed.
Yeah, the opposition that I've received, and maybe you all have received via email, is coming from another segment of the anesthesiology world, and that's the CRNAs. That's a certified registered nurse and anesthetist.
I think we need to make him say anesthetist as many times as he can today.
CRNAs. That's so the CRNAs and AAs, and it's they're both very, very educated professions. They both have schools that educate them. They both work in the same field, and so Sometimes there's a little bit of, I mean, we've seen a little bit of friction between allied health programs. We've seen it with the optometrists and the ophthalmologists. I've seen it in my career with engineers and architects. Sometimes professions overlap a little bit, and so there's a little friction. And so you're probably getting some emails from CRNAs. The education requirements are similar. The CRNAs do have a nursing degree, a master's in nursing. An AA can have any degree, as I mentioned earlier. They do have requirements to have pre-medical courses in whatever degree they get, but they could have a degree in biology or physics or whatever. It's not a nursing degree, where the CRNAs have a nursing degree. They typically are they're recognized by Medicare, CMS, the VA, many of the organizations that use their services or allow their services in the federal government see their services on an equal basis. So the intent with this bill is that we do have the ability, these people go to schools. I think there's 9 schools out there that teach this, one actually in a school just in a state just south of us. And so if people get these degrees and they do move to Wyoming, they ought to be able to practice their profession. And that's simply what this is doing, is allowing them to practice their profession. So hopefully that
Thank you.
answers your question.
Senator Furphy has another question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's kind of my understanding, Mr. Pappas, that there is a shortage in Wyoming of anesthesiologists and then accordingly assistants to help those people. Is that your understanding, Mr. Pappas?
Mr.
Senator
Chairman,
Pappas, go ahead.
Senator Furphy, it's my understanding it is, but frankly, I think there's more people that will testify that can actually answer that question for you much better than I could.
I think we have a lot of knowledge sitting in the room here that will testify. So, further questions, committee? Thank you, Senator
Thank you.
Pappas. Let's hear from departments first. Let's hear from Board of Medicine, perhaps. Welcome, Mr. Blunbus. Good to see you this morning.
You too, Mr.
Welcome in person and not on the screen, right?
Yes, exactly. And thank you very much, Kevin Bonner-Blust, Executive Director of the State Board of Medicine. I'm here because our board would be the one charged with administering these licenses. I primarily here just to answer questions that you might have related to the administration of this. I do want to just make 2 quick points. There would be some cost to the board because we would be needing to set up new licenses and interdependencies between physicians and the AAs in our system. That's going to be about a $45,000 ticket. We've got the funds to do it. We would just need to get the authorization to spend them. So I want to make sure the committee's aware of that. And then the second is, as we're in a very strange time and running very late in the season compared to what we normally would be in a legislative session, I would respectfully ask if possible, could the bill be amended to have a delayed effective date of 1/1/22, as was done with the PA bill, simply to give us enough time to get the pieces in place if the bill does pass. So that would be the only ask I've got at you at this point. Other than that, if there are questions about how this would be administered, please let me know. But the board has no position on this and is ready to do whatever the body tells it to do.
Questions, committee? No questions. You got off easy today, Mr. Blunbus.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for
I'll
coming.
be around for questions do come up though.
We'll grab you. We can reach you from here. No other departments here? Hospital Association? Any testimony? Okay, very good. Well, then let's just start on the front row. That's always good. It's like going to church. When you're in the front row, you got to go up first. Introduce yourselves and let us know what you got on your mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're just reinforcing the reason all of us sit in the back row at church, I guess. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Mike Smith. I'm an attorney here in Cheyenne and contract lobbyist for the Wyoming Society of Anesthesiologists. And we're here today to strongly support Senate File 104. And I appreciate Senator Pappas's remarks. She did a great job, so we'll try not to take a lot of time repeating what he said. I'm joined here in the room by Dr. John Mansell from Gillette. And on the Zoom call, we have an AA who grew up in Wyoming who would like to give you a little bit of her experience in the profession and what her job is. And I'll let them both speak for themselves. They're the experts, not me. So if it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over to Dr. Mansell.
Thank you, Mike. Dr. Mansell.
Mr. Chairman, Senators, thanks for having us this morning. My name's John Mansell. I'm a physician anesthesiologist. I'm a veteran and I practice in Gillette. I serve as president of the Wyoming Society of Anesthesiologists, or WSA, and I sit on the board of directors for the American Society of Anesthesiologists as well. On behalf of the WSA, I'm here to testify in strong support of SF 104, legislation that would authorize the licensure and regulation of anesthesiologist assistants, or as we've established, we call them AAs. Enactment of this measure would provide the residents of Wyoming access to the benefits the AAs currently provide, benefits that patients in 17 other jurisdictions around the United States already receive from AAs today. As we've discussed earlier, AAs are highly trained, master's degree level non-physician anesthesia care providers. They work under the medical direction of physician anesthesiologists. AAs work exclusively within anesthesia, which means their training is highly focused on that. All AAs possess a pre-medical undergraduate education and are competitive applicants for medical school, some of which do actually go that path. They complete a comprehensive classroom and on-hands or hands-on operating room curriculum that was designed by anesthesiologists 60 years ago, 600 hours in the classroom and 2,600 hours in the operating room before graduating. Typically, that takes about 24 to 28 months. We started training them in 1969, so this is not a new mid-level position. They are trained extensively in the delivery and maintenance of quality anesthesia care, as well as monitoring techniques. This is an established profession. AAs are recognized by the Centers of Medicare and Medicaid. They are recognized by TRICARE and all major commercial insurance payers. CMS recognizes AAs as non-physician anesthesia providers. They are as safe and effective as nurse anesthetists. There is no peer-reviewed or other credible evidence of any sort that care provided by anesthesiologist assistants is any less safe than that of a nurse anesthetist. Otherwise, we would not be advocating for this. In many environments, like the University of Colorado and Florida, AAs and CRNAs work together seamlessly. It is not intended to eclipse anybody. So as a Wyoming citizen, I would encourage you to increase the diversity of job opportunities in our state by supporting this bill. And as a physician anesthesiologist, I would strongly encourage you to support the legislation so Wyoming patients can benefit from the highly trained care of AAs that they provide. Thanks for your consideration.
Questions for Dr. Mansell, committee? Senator McLuhan.
Dr. Mansell, just one quick question. Can you tell me the difference between a CRNA and an AA? I mean, I understand the license requirements and one can do some stuff, the other can't, but it seems to me it's almost the same job minus supervision, and I'm having a hard time wrapping my brain around it. Thank you, sir.
Dr. Mansell, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator McKeon, while at the end, they are doing the same job, the path to their certification for that job is unique and different. For certified registered nurse anesthetists or CRNAs, they went through a nursing program and got a bachelor's of science in nursing, and then generally from there went on to nurse anesthesia school, which is about 2 years long. For clinical anesthesiologist assistants, frequently they do a pre-med program that is almost identical to what I would have done to go to medical school. It's just that they elected not to go to medical school. Perhaps they didn't want to go through 8 to 12 more years of school. They just wanted to focus on one specialty. And so they went to anesthesiologist assistant school. So both require bachelor's degrees. Both have roughly a 2-year training curriculum after that. What might be different as far as their path, if I were going to differentiate the path, based on your question, and not in an effort to negatively differentiate from nurse anesthetists, many of whom have enjoyed great working relationships, both in civilian settings and in combat settings, is that they have to take the same medical entrance exam I do, the MCAT that I would take to go to medical school to get admission, or they take a GRE. And so while they're both in a similar job role, their paths were just different. And as I said, in academic departments, like I have friends at the University of Florida and now University of Colorado, when you're in the operating room, it's not like we're running around with labels on our chest. You really can't differentiate the two of us apart, the nurse anesthetist from the AA.
Further questions, committee? Follow up, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I think I'm hearing they go to the same school on the 2-year train up. Am I wrong there?
Dr.
Mr.
Mansell,
Chairman?
go ahead.
Thank you. No, it's not the same school. The nurse anesthetist school is unique and different than the AA schools. And the nurse anesthetist school was a curriculum designed completely separately from the AA curriculum. So I'm not going to be able to tell you that I can intimately tell you the difference between the curriculum, but I can tell you that they are unique and different from each other in that instance.
I believe Senator McLuhan, I believe some of the CRNAs in the room probably give us more focus on that, can tell you more about their education. Further questions, committee? Go ahead, Senator Hutchings.
Dr. Mansell, sorry about that. Do you have the bill in front of you?
I do not, ma'am.
Does he have a copy?
I do now, ma'am.
Excellent. As I was reading through the bill, when I got to page 8, I was thinking, boy, above this and below this, you see a lot of with supervision. So I'm wondering, everything on page 8, they're able to do without any supervision? The AAs, do you see that?
Dr. Mansell, go ahead.
Thank you. So their training includes the ability to do this.
Okay.
Much as a registered nurse working on the floor of a hospital puts in an IV or inserts a Foley catheter, these are essential tasks that are just a component of their job description, which means it's also included in their training.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further questions, committee? Let's go ahead and get the AA who's online. Amanda, if we can. What's her name, Mr. Smith?
That's Miss Brandy Lunsford, Mr. Chairman.
If we can get Brandy Lunsford into the room, we'll allow her to testify. The age of technology where we all sit and stare at a screen.
Mr. Chairman, we have Brandy in the room now.
Very good. Brandy, we're just waiting to see you. I see, oh, there
Hi,
you go.
can you hear me?
Go ahead, introduce yourself and present to the committee.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. My name is Brandy Lunsford. I'm a certified anesthesiologist assistant, and I grew up in Evanston, Wyoming. I actually graduated from Evanston High School. I think many of you know Wendy Schuler. She was actually my PE teacher and track coach. I still have strong ties to Wyoming. My parents live in Evanston, where my dad is a police officer and my mom is a teacher. I have 3 siblings that attend the University of Wyoming and another that lives in Afton. I currently work at Emory St. Joseph's Hospital in Atlanta, as Wyoming doesn't recognize my license or skill set at this time. I am here to testify in strong support of SF 104. As we all know, this legislation would authorize the licensure and regulation of anesthesiologist assistants, AAs. I, along with my other AA colleagues, provide high quality and affordable anesthesia care to our patients. So a little bit about me. I graduated from Evanston High School. I received my undergraduate degree from Utah State University in biology and chemistry. I took the MCAT in order to get into Emory's AA program, where I attended their School of Medicine and graduated with a Master's of Medical Science in Anesthesia. Upon completion of my training, I wanted to return back to Wyoming, but due to the state not recognizing my profession, I haven't been able to, and I currently reside in Georgia. I have been practicing for 6 years now. As an AA, I'm a highly trained anesthesia provider, and like was mentioned before, and I think that maybe this will help clarify, I did attend Emory School of Medicine for their Anesthesiologist Assistant program. I currently work alongside my physician anesthesiologist colleagues under medical direction to implement anesthesia care plans within the anesthesia care team environment, which means that patients will always have 2 people involved in their anesthesia care. My profession it's an established profession. It's been around for over 4 decades. We're recognized by CMS, TRICARE, and all other commercial insurance payers. CMS recognizes AAs as qualified non-physician anesthesia providers, just like our CRNA counterparts. AAs are as safe and effective as nurse anesthetists. In my current practice here at Emory, I work alongside CRNAs, and most people don't know who is an AA or a CRNA unless they ask, as we have the same job responsibilities, duties, and work together cohesively in our current hospital environment. As a practicing anesthesiologist assistant of 6 years and a Wyoming native, I strongly encourage your support of AA legislation so Wyoming patients can benefit from the highly trained care that AAs provide. I would love to be able to return home and take care of patients in Wyoming, as well as raise my children in the state that I still consider home. Thank you all for your consideration.
Thank you, Brandy. Any questions for Brandy Committee? Senator Furphy, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, first of all, let me say congratulations to you. And we need to do whatever we can to get you back to Wyoming. So my question is, would you explain the continuing education requirements that you have to meet, either on an annual basis or however often you get updated education? Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Furphy. Brandy, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, yes. So currently, we have to obtain a minimum of 40 continuing medical education credits or hours every 2 years that are submitted to our board certification association. And then along with that, we also have to take a recertification exam, which is similar to the original certification exam we took upon graduation. And that's every 6 years. So actually, I just recently recertified this last year.
Further questions, committee? No further questions. Thank you very much for your presentation. We always like having Wyoming people around, and Evanston's in my district, so thank you very much. Let's move to the back row here in the room. Anyone from the back row that wishes to come up? The seats are warm now. Please introduce yourselves and tell us your good words.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Catherine Wilkinson. Today I am here representing the Wyoming Association of Nurse Anesthetists. Mr. Chairman, we are here today in opposition to the bill. I just want to let you know a little bit about them. There are 76 members of the Nurse Anesthetists Association here. They're also known as the CRNAs. They are able to provide independent anesthesia care in all 50 states and DC. And I have a couple of people joining me today, Mr. Chairman, that have far more knowledge in this area than I do. I would like to introduce Tracy Richard from Torrington, Wyoming, and we also have Perry Davison on the Zoom, as well as a couple other CRNAs that would be available to answer questions. We won't have all of them testify to keep everything brief, but happy to answer any questions you may have, Mr. Chairman. And I do believe there was one question about distinguishing the difference in education. Ms. Richard will be able to do so. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Wilkinson. Ms. Richards, go ahead, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I'm a little nervous. Never done this before. Thank you for having us.
Don't be nervous. We're gentle, we don't bite.
Thank goodness.
So
All
far
right.
this year. It could change.
Well, thank you. Again, my name is Tracy Richard. I'm a certified registered nurse anesthetist, or CRNA. I've been an RN for over 20 years. I've been a practicing CRNA for over 9 years. I've practiced in several hospitals throughout the state currently, in different, as well as Colorado and Pennsylvania. I am in opposition to Senate File 104 for two main reasons. Lack of cost effectiveness to Wyoming and to Wyoming hospitals and healthcare systems, and lack of functionality in Wyoming, especially in rural Wyoming. To address the lack of cost effectiveness, I would like to discuss salaries. AAs make roughly the same income salary as a CRNA, roughly $160,000. However, they require the direct supervision of a physician anesthesiologist, who in Wyoming, the average income is $350,000. So for an example, I work in Torrington, Wyoming at the Torrington Community Hospital. It is they currently employ 2 CRNAs, so that is roughly $320,000 a year to provide 24/7 coverage. If they were to employ just one AA, they would be required to employ a physician anesthesiologist. So that expense to the hospital would be $510,000, an extra added expense of $190,000. That is not cost effective. Let us take that a step further and address the lack of functionality of AAs in Wyoming. Torrington Community Hospital is a 25-bed critical access facility. Critical access hospitals make up over 60% of the hospitals in Wyoming. AAs cannot provide services to a patient unless there is a physician anesthesiologist within the same building and immediately available. If an AA is on call for surgery or OB or ER, they cannot perform care for that patient until a physician anesthesiologist arrives. 2 providers are needed for one provider, the AA, to provide care or services to the patient. If that physician anesthesiologist is sick or on vacation, or for any other reason is not able to provide direct supervision to that AA, another physician anesthesiologist must be available to supervise, not just available, but approved to supervise that AA, or no anesthesia services can be provided by that AA. Thus having to shut down the operating room and any OB, ER, or other hospital anesthesia services required. The AA is unserviceable and unusable without a physician anesthesiologist available. They are not a good fit for Wyoming. They are not cost effective or functional in Wyoming as a state, let alone for our residents in our hospitals. To address the difference between AAs and CRNAs. CRNAs are trained to be independent practitioners. We are trained to provide the same services as an MDA and to provide those independently. State licensing states that we are independent providers. The CMS rule for participation in Medicare requires us to be supervised, CRNAs to be supervised by a physician who is working with us, whether that be an OB physician, an ER physician, the surgeon in the room. It is not a standard of care. It is asked from Medicare to participate in Medicare. It's not a standard of care. We are trained to be independent. AAs are not trained to be independent. They are always to be supervised and directed by an anesthesiologist. They cannot function independently. And in Wyoming, the majority of the state, 60% of the state, functions in rural settings where CRNAs are the predominant providers because one, we can function independently, granted under the supervision of whatever provider we're working with, just because of the CMS stipulation. AAs cannot function in that realm. So it's always going to be cost inhibitive to have AAs. And my example that I gave only allowed for one AA, and it was already $190,000 over budget of what they were currently paying. That means they'd have to work 24/7. You need two, just like we do now, where there's two CRNAs, so we split it up. So you would truly have to hire more. Thank you for your time. I'll answer any questions you have. Sorry. Thank you.
You did very well. You didn't stutter hardly at all.
Yeah.
I believe we had one more CRNA on screen. I think I saw Miss Davison on screen. Or did she run away? We'll get her testimony and we'll ask questions. There she is. Miss Davison, welcome to Labor and Health. Go ahead and present.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. My name is Perry Davison. I've been a nurse for 29 years and a certified registered nurse anesthetist for 17 and a half. I currently work in South Lincoln Medical Center in Kemmer, Wyoming, where we have 2 ORs. We only employ nurse anesthetists. I am the president of the Wyoming Association of Nurse Anesthesia. I'm here testifying against Senate File 104. CRNAs have provided safe and effective care for rural areas for many years. CRNAs can collaborate directly with the physicians who are doing the procedure and decide the best action to be taken. CRNAs are the answer to any shortage of anesthesia providers that may exist in Wyoming facilities. They fulfill many roles in rural hospitals, including obstetrical, emergency, operating room, pain treatments, and a variety of other things. We're able to do this under the supervision of the operating practitioner when providing anesthesia care. All of your districts utilize CRNAs in some capacity. So I want to use an analogy for you. If you're a carpenter and you make a chair, the chair is going to have 4 legs. It's going to turn out with a back and 4 legs. Now that same carpenter is going to observe someone else making a chair, only they may observe up to 4 different people in different rooms. When they come to check on them, oops, a leg is on upside down. They can just do that over. But with anesthesia, we're giving drugs that can end a life if they're not done safely. There's no way to get it back. Why would you leave an anesthesiologist assistant instead of a direct provider like an anesthesiologist or a CRNA to take care of your patients? Don't accept this for your family or the people of your districts. In addition, anesthesiologists are the only ones who can utilize these tools and make extra income. This is not a tool for anybody else in this capacity. This is a push against what we've already established is high quality care. And it's not acceptable for our facilities and our patients. Our recertification includes 60 class A credits in 4 years and 40 class B credits in 4 years. We have to do 4 core modules, which include running through scenarios and having different ideas and different abilities to come up with the treatment for those modules. So we ask you to vote against Senate File 104 and protect the care that's already being given in the state of Wyoming. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Davison. Full disclosure, that is my wife. Questions, Senator Bouchard.
Full disclosure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To anybody who wants to answer, I see 16 states do this, including, and in addition to Washington, D.C., they allow similar practices. What's in this bill? Any data showing that people are having a problem in those states? I mean, the sky is falling there as opposed to in Colorado as well. Colorado does allow this practice that we're doing in this bill. So I'm just curious, is there any data showing that they're having problems there?
Mr. Chairman.
Whoever wishes to address that. Ms. Richards looks like she's ready to jump in.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Bouchard or Senator Bouchard, when you say the sky is falling, I'm not, nobody's saying that anything's bad with AAs. It's just that our argument is they are not right for Wyoming. They're not cost effective for Wyoming. AAs are trained to not be independent. They are dependent upon a physician anesthesiologist. So their usefulness and their functionality are very limited. We are not, a lot of references were made today that AAs and CRNAs are equal. We are not equal. We are trained, CRNAs are trained to be independent and think independently and provide independent care. Granted, we work with supervising physicians, but that is merely to participate in Medicare. AAs do not have that ability. So we're just saying it is not right for Wyoming. It may be working well in those other states, but Wyoming is not a good fit. And if there is a shortage, CRNAs or MDAs are the appropriate fit because they can function independently.
Follow-up question, Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what I'm hearing is you're saying that it won't work. It's not good for Wyoming. If that's the case, I mean, wouldn't the numbers, the people that crunch the numbers, the bean counters, the people at the top that make the decisions say, well, this isn't good. And then even if we pass this bill, they're going to still make decisions based on that. I mean, this would actually allow a free market to actually allow, if one hospital says, hey, we want to have a anesthesiologist and he's going to have an assistant, or he or she, and they could set them up in teams where maybe they had, I mean, because the bigger the hospital, the more the flow, and the more I could see they would need something like this. So maybe it won't be good for rural Wyoming, but I can see in Cheyenne and Casper, this could be a definite improvement and a free market solution. So, I mean, don't you think the free market can work this out on its own?
May I?
Go ahead, Ms. Richards.
Mr. Chairman, 2 points. So in the fair market argument, it's not fair argument. This is not competitive. If you look at AAs, they are an extension of an anesthesiologist, a physician anesthesiologist. CRNAs can work with anesthesiologists as well. So a physician anesthesiologist can have AAs working under him, and he's an independent. CRNAs cannot have AAs working underneath them. And to bring up kind of similar to Perry's example of physician anesthesiologist has 4 rooms running, and he's got AAs in every one of those rooms. So he's supervising those 4 rooms. If something goes wrong in 1 or 2 or more of those rooms and his attention is directed elsewhere, if anything goes on in the other rooms, he's not available to those providers to supervise and direct. He's dealing with the other issues going on in the other rooms. CRNAs can act and take care of, without that guidance and supervision of a physician anesthesiologist in those rooms, and handle the situation. When it comes to fair market, we cannot utilize an AA as an anesthesiologist can. An anesthesiologist gets to charge for his care over those 4 rooms. He gets a payment back from those 4 rooms. We only get payment of the patients we provide care to individually, because we don't have that ability. Yet we are trained independent, and so is the anesthesiologist. In response to the other part of your question, remind me quickly, what was the second part? One was the competition, and then, other hospital, the rural part of it. I don't know how else to better state that obviously rural, it's not effective for rural. If you have the ability to, at a larger facility, say Cheyenne, have AAs versus CRNAs, if we get paid roughly the same amount of money, then it's equally fair. If you're also going to employ anesthesiologists at those settings, it's equally fair to have both. But you have the independent factor and flexibility of a CRNA at those larger facilities, whereas you don't have that flexibility with the AA. If the anesthesiologist is running some rooms covering CRNAs, say just CRNAs at that hospital, and something goes on in OB, and he needs to run down to OB really quick and take care of an emergency C-section, those CRNAs can fly. They can take care of those and legally do everything they need to do. AAs cannot. They have to have medical supervision. And when it comes to reimbursement, when the anesthesiologist is filling out, if you're charging for part of the payment of those rooms that you are supervising. There are 7 factors that you have to meet to legally and not fraudulently get that reimbursement. And one of those is waking up and going to sleep and being available, 3 of those, waking up, going to sleep, and being available for any type of emergency that happens. If those 7 factors aren't met, they can't charge for that, their input into that. So again, it's all about flexibility and usefulness and functionality and cost effectiveness.
Thank you, Ms. Richards. I see the two, before we ask any more questions, we've got another face on the screen. I'm assuming it's a CRNA. He's smiling, so that must be true. Can you tell us your name, sir, and we'll let you participate in answering questions here real quick.
Hi, my name is Dr. Daniel Rust. I am a CRNA here in Casper, Wyoming. I currently work at Summit Medical Center as a fully autonomous CRNA practitioner. I have 9 years as a nurse and currently going on my 2nd year as a CRNA. I just wanted to add to kind of what the other CRNAs have said. It's not about the AAs being trained to do what they're trained to do. My fear would be all of us have loved ones, and in an emergency, let's say, one of our family members gets in a life-threatening car accident and is taken to a major hospital in Casper, where was mentioned it might be more beneficial to have AAs in Casper. If that family member is in a life-threatening situation and the only participating anesthesia provider is an AA, they cannot help save the life of your family member until the anesthesiologist is there. And that's something that scares me. It has nothing to do with their abilities. I know that they're trained to operate under an anesthesiologist. We don't have to do that. If I was the provider in that hospital and your family member came in, I'm trained to do everything that an anesthesiologist can do. I can save that patient's life. Now, having a background as an intensive care nurse, I have participated and run life-threatening code situations where people went into cardiac or respiratory arrest. I have saved people's lives in those situations. Those situations don't happen all the time in the operating room, but when they do, those seconds really count. Now, some of the studies that were mentioned about how they are just as safe and effective, there's no peer-reviewed journals, there's no peer-reviewed studies that say that. In fact, one of those studies, the Epstein study, said in a 1-to-2 ratio, 35% of the time, the TEFRA rules were not followed under medical direction. So likely, if it was a 1-to-4 situation, 70% of the time, there would be fraud being committed. To avoid fraud, a 1-to-1 ratio, which is fiscally impossible in our situations today in the hospital setting, where we need to be efficient in turnover times and getting patients their surgeries. No one likes to wait for extended periods for surgery, where an anesthesiologist would have to be present for every single start of a procedure. Imagine if all 4 of those AAs had to start at 7:30. It's impossible. It would create fraud. And when fraud happens, it doesn't just affect us as anesthesia providers. It also puts the hospital at risk of losing credibility. There can be major lawsuits that affect the hospital and the funding. Also, in addition to that, we're already in a budget crisis in the state of Wyoming. I don't need to say anything. That you guys are the experts in that, and I trust you all and appreciate all you all do for the state of Wyoming. I don't feel that increasing the cost of healthcare is the right move for you, for our family members, and for our fellow citizens here in Wyoming. Again, I just want to reiterate the fact that an independent practitioner is the best way to go. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Sorry, I stutter every once in a while.
Nope. Thank you for being here, and stand by. We may have some more questions for you. I see one hand raised. Senator Hutchins, go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To both of the the 3 of the CRNAs, appreciate your testimony. but I'm a little perplexed, and maybe you can kind of help me here with this. I understand what you're saying, but this bill just allows for licensing and certification of these assistants, which could be a good thing, could not be a good thing. I don't know if the 16 states that were mentioned down there were states where there's a large population and hospitals may have a lot of money and they can afford these assistants or not. So the question would be, what's wrong with bringing on the licensure and the certification and allowing a hospital to choose whether they want the CRNA or to extend their employment opportunities for the anesthesiologist with an assistant? That's my basic question.
If anybody would like to answer that, raise your hand. Ms. Richards, she's stepping forward. Go ahead.
Senator Chairman, we absolutely could. I see your point. It makes sense to let the hospitals decide that, and that's very logical, makes sense. I'm merely looking at it at the point of fiscally responsible, and it's already cost prohibitive to them to do that. In the rural settings, not necessarily the larger settings, I see that point. My argument to that would be the ability, the possibility of the fraud that the other CRNA talked about, the TEFA, the 7 rules of TEFA. With an AA, they have to follow those rules because they are requiring that supervision. If those rules aren't followed, and yet the charges are still put through in that fashion, then that is fraud. And the hospitals can lose Medicare participation for that, which is a huge part of funding. So that would have to be tracked very closely. Whereas a situation that happened, like I said, of the OB, the anesthesiologists having to step away to OB, the CRNAs are okay because they are underneath, because of Medicare, underneath the surgeons. So no fraud would take place. It wouldn't be an issue. It still would be okay in that realm of it. I don't know if that clarifies very well or not. And they're not trained, once again, not trained to be independent. So you've got that whole dependency.
Follow up, Senator Hutchins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It makes sense, again, what you're saying, but still, I see, as Wyoming, how do we grow these AAs? How do we allow them to, like the young lady, come back home and get the experience, or maybe even the desire? Maybe I'll go back to school and become a CRNA now because I know I can do this on my own. We're kind of putting a stumbling block in front of them and saying, we don't even want you in the state, or we don't even want you to have a chance to be in the state because we got this. So I just see, I see that stumbling block there. And it just seems like it's unfair to say, you know what, you're gonna make a stool with 3 legs instead of a chair with 3 instead of 4. Really? I mean, if they're practicing in other states and they're doing fine there and they can come here and a large hospital can afford to have them, again, what is a problem with just allowing licensure and certification? That's what I'm asking. You know, it's like having a baker. I only bake cakes and I bake them good. And then I want to bake cakes and pies. And you're like, well, you're a good pie and whatever baker. And then the guy who bakes the cakes wants to make a pie every once in a while. Why will we stop him? Like he said, the free market should allow the hospitals to choose.
I see a hand in the air. Sir, go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Chairman. Senator, I totally understand what you're saying. And fairness in allowing them to be licensed and to be able to come home. And I don't think it's necessarily a matter of being able to come home. All of us love to come home, but sometimes our professions don't allow us to do that. Fairness, we were required, as CRNAs, we were required to have a nursing license in the background of medicine. Just going to school does not give us that background in medicine. Physicians, they're required to get a medical degree. Dentists are required to get a dental degree. Anesthesia assistants, we're not required to have any healthcare degree. So if we're mentioning fairness, we all had to have some sort of healthcare background degree, not biology, not chemistry, because we've all taken those classes. But that doesn't mean that I've had that healthcare degree to be further specialized. I know Kentucky is a state that allows AAs, but they also, in addition to that, said that their AAs had to maintain and keep a physician assistant license or RN license. So if we're just talking about licensing AAs and allowing AAs to come into our state, and fairness, I would say, ensuring that they follow Kentucky's standpoint of having to have a PA license. Even the American Association of Physician Assistants has said the only difference, the only similarity that they have between their licenses is that they have to be supervised and directed by a physician. So if we're going that standpoint and wanting to do that, I think requiring them to maintain the same standards that Kentucky would require and having them have that physician assistant license that would further enable them and further train them to be as effective and as good as other AAs in other states.
Thank you. Are there further questions for the CRNAs committee? I don't believe so. Thank you very much, all.
Thank you for your time.
Are there further testimony here in the room? Now is your chance. Mr. Bowley, go ahead, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Eric Bowley, President of the Wyoming Hospital Association. We're actually just monitoring this bill, but I did think I would add just a little bit of comment here. We are grateful for and support our anesthesiologists and our CRNAs. And there are different situations in all of our different facilities on how this particular program may or may not work and impact the way that we deliver care. In our rural settings, absolutely, this is probably not a very good fit, simply from the economics of it. CRNAs are highly utilized in many of our rural critical access hospitals. And that's a good fit for them because as has been described, they can basically act independent. They can be supervised by the surgeon, by the family practice doc that's delivering the baby, and they don't need that direct anesthesia oversight. In some of our larger facilities though, I could see where this may work. And I think one of the things we've touched on here is the economics. We're gonna have to be able to crunch the numbers and make sure that it works. We're gonna have to take a look at the quality of care that's provided. And I think that one of my concerns, and it's not contained within the bill because it's not really what the bill is, but I think one of the important things is that it should be the facilities decision, the medical staff in the facilities they meet and go through their bylaws, whether or not anesthesia assistants would be used in those particular situations. But what I will tell you is whether it's an anesthesiologist or it's a CRNA, the care that they deliver, the service they render is vital in hospitals all across our state, in surgical centers, and we would be lost without them. And I will tell you, and all of you know that Senator Baldwin and I, we have a long history. We worked together for over 20 years together in Kemmer, and his wife Perry worked for me there, and we helped her go through CRNA school, and it was one of the greatest things we did. We helped build our own so that we could have anesthesia coverage in our community. But I'll tell you, three of my children were born in South Lincoln Medical Center. They were all delivered, and CRNAs were the ones that delivered the care to my wife, and we had great outcomes. So we just want the ability to make good decisions from a hospital perspective on what's best for patients, and also to take a look at the financial impact. The other thing that I think would be important for us to talk a little bit about, and it has nothing to do with this bill, but since we're talking about anesthesia, many states in our nation have allowed the CRNA supervision to be opted out. So they don't require any supervision. And that's something I think would be worth talking about in the future. They are trained and they are willing and able to do things independently, but they haven't been allowed to do that in our state. So I think it's something maybe in the interim we could look at from our committee's perspective as we take a look at interim topics for joint labor, health, and social services. With that said, I'd answer any questions.
That was a great plug for an interim topic, Aaron. Yeah, it's not official, but that was very good. Questions, committee. Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, we look at all the economics of this, and I even if we pass this, I don't see the just an immediate shift. So that's one. I mean, I want you to answer that one, and then I think if it's a good thing and a hospital wants to do it, they should have the ability to do it. And so I want to have your opinion on that. And also, I mean, this probably isn't a question, but I've been through enough of these fights where I get that little spidey sense starts happening back here when I start seeing the fences come up. So it seems it's always the same type of fight. So I guess the final thing I want to know is if this does happen, I mean, the bylaws that you mentioned, I think those are all free market ideas. So now we have the ability for, if we pass this bill, it's not going to happen overnight. And I think it's a free market ability of a hospital to make a decision. And I think that's a good thing for the people. So I want your opinion on that. So,
Mr. Bowley, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Bouchard. So your first point is you're correct. I think with the extension, this is sometime in 2022 before it could even be enacted. It gives the Board of Medicine time to work on it. And so it wouldn't be immediate. It would give us time to look at what's happening in other states and come up with a plan and determine whether or not it makes sense for our hospitals. Secondly, I think the important part is this couldn't be a unilateral decision that the anesthesiologist could just immediately decide we're going to start using AAs in our operating rooms or wherever it might be in the facilities. It would have to be done through a meeting of the medical staff and through their bylaws. And so I think that that's important, that it's a joint decision and they can take a look at all the different factors. As far as your spidey sense, you might need to get an injection or something for that one. I'm not going to get into defenses because a lot of times we're accused of the same thing when it comes to hospitals and other things. But I do think that it's just important that we take a look at this topic as a whole and make really sound and informed decisions as we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Bowley. There's one for the questions. We need to get this moving, committee. Go ahead.
We'll try. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you answer some of those concerns they had, like the chair with 3 legs instead of 2, or any issues that the anesthesiologist, the AA has in an operating room? Have you heard of any? Does this frighten you in any way? I know I'm asking a lot of questions quickly because he said so. Is this like a small mom and pop grocery store afraid of Walmart coming in? What's your sense on this?
Mr. Bowley, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hutchins. So I understand the 4-legged analogy. I would tell you that I think one of the concerns is I can understand the concern. And that is if you've got one anesthesiologist that's overseeing multiple AAs and things are going on. I can understand where there may be some concern as far as their ability to provide immediate attention in each of those situations if one of the legs falls off or if 2 of the legs fall off. I think it's something that needs to be looked at. And I think within the bill, I'm trying to remember, it's a long bill. I don't remember how many AAs are allowed to be supervised at one time under an anesthesiologist. That might be something that we might want to consider. There is a big difference though, normally with the CRNA oversight compared to what I'm hearing here is that it's usually a one-on-one situation where they have immediate access to the physician that's overseeing them. And a lot of times they're in the same room while baby's being delivered or while a surgery is being performed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowley.
Thank you,
Have a
Mr. Chairman.
seat. Stefan, we'll allow you to come up and sort of wrap this up. We need to get things moving here. Answer any of those questions quickly and wrap it up, and we'll allow you to sit in and work the bill real quickly if you want to. Go ahead, Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Great discussion. I appreciated everybody who contributed. Just a couple of comments on what I heard. First of all, to the point of cost effectiveness, certainly I believe that is a market-driven thing. I don't think we should legislate cost effectiveness. I mean, we try to do that in the legislature all the time, but when we're talking about decisions of whether a hospital wants to hire a CRNA or whether they want to hire an anesthesiologist and an AA, that should not be a legislative driven decision. Again, I agree with a couple of the members on your panel that said that should be a market driven, free market driven item. One thing that I heard also was a little bit about fraud. I'm not so sure that I have to push back just a little bit about that, because I don't know that there's any evidence that there would be fraud. I think that's all purely speculation. And I don't think we as a legislature ought to deal in speculation, although again, a lot of times we do. And then I guess the final thing that I would let me bring up, I actually made a note on it. Maybe I can find it. I'll just bring it from memory. The last issue deals with kind of what Senator Bouchard alluded to as fencing. It was not my intent, while a lot of folks may be looking for legislation that would create a competitive advantage. I actually was not really looking for that competitive advantage in bringing this bill. I was actually looking for options to provide Wyoming with other options and to provide Wyoming citizens who have degrees in this field to be able to come back to Wyoming practice. You heard the testimony. I think it's merely a matter of fairness. There should be no reason why a certain profession believes that they can only do that work when there's allied professions out there that can do it as well. And the arguments of protecting the patients in Wyoming, of cost effectiveness, of fraud, all of those things I believe are really out of the realm of the bill. As Senator Hutchings said, this is a licensure bill allowing the practice. And I think all those other factors will be determined by hospitals and providers. So with that, we can quickly look at the bill.
Thank you, Senator Pappas. I just see a new face on the screen there. And sir, I can't see your name. I apologize. If you can give us a real quick, brief testimony, we need to get this bill worked, but go ahead and introduce yourself and give us a quick testimony, please.
Yeah. Hello. I hope you guys can hear me. My name is Michael Johnson. This may seem a little weird. I'll try to sum this up as quick as I can. I'm working up in Montana. I was born and raised in Wyoming, graduated from a little high school. Many of you probably know Glen Rock. So I'm a herder from back in the days. And I worked very strenuously in my second career in my adult life to become a CRNA, very specific choice for me. I won't go into the history of details of that, but I did graduate initially from my nursing in Sheridan, and my bachelor's at the University of Wyoming. Went on, did practice in Arizona, and then did a degree at University of New England in Maine. Found desperately trying to find my way back to Wyoming as a CRNA over a decade ago. I finally got a chance to do that, and I was absolutely thrilled to do it, and found my way back to Gillette, where I was actually I was born in Casper, but the first 3 years of my life I lived in Gillette. So I practiced as a CRNA in Gillette, Wyoming, when I finally got a chance to do so, and I was thrilled. So you might ask yourself, well, why am I in Montana? I left Gillette because I was in a mixed model there. That's where the hospital employed MDAs and CRNAs. And because of this supervision rule that you brought up, there had to be a physician anesthesiologist, somewhere in the building. But in terms of actual supervision, there was never any of that. In other words, what I mean by that is I was always expected to practice independently and make independent decisions. And in fact, that's what I did. And I spent some of my time, in fact, training MDAs in how to do different blocks under ultrasound guidance. That's neither here nor there. But at some point I left Gillette, and I left Gillette because of a matter of disgust to me. And forgive me if I feel a little incensed and my spidey senses are up a little bit, but and I do appreciate the free market argument. But if it's going to be a free market argument, then we should make it that way across the board and eliminate supervision in Wyoming as well for CRNAs. Because magically, the day that I crossed the Montana border, I practiced without supervision, doing all the exact same things that I did in Gillette, without any supervision whatsoever, because Montana has an unrestricted scope of practice for CRNAs. There's no supervision rule. There's no opt-out. There's no AAs. So that's one point. The other reason I left Gillette is because there was 5 anesthesiologists and 6 CRNAs. And on any given day in the building, there was 1, maybe 2 MDAs and 6 CRNAs. The CRNAs were doing all of the labor, and the MDAs were not. A good 60% of them were nowhere to be found. And so, yeah, there is a little bit of, that upset me a little bit. That's very clear that I was getting paid half the amount of money for doing all of the labor, or the healthy portion of the labor, me and my CRNA colleagues. And to my knowledge, that's still probably the problem that exists in some of these larger places like Casper and Cheyenne and Sheridan. Less so Sheridan because it's a nice place to live, but Gillette, because the model there is very authoritative and difficult for CRNAs to survive in, because they have to live in an environment where they're told that they're dangerous without supervision. And quite frankly, that disgusted me to such a point I had to leave that environment. And I think that's probably one of the problems they have. So I don't think the AA bill has anything to do about expanding practice or offering licensure to people who want to come back to Wyoming, maybe tangentially a little bit. But I think what it has to do with is about protecting their market in these larger places. Because the reality is if there was an wide open practice model, such as you're suggesting for free market, CRNAs would be able to freely go into Casper and Cheyenne and Rock Springs and Sheridan and Gillette, and we could practice side by side with our anesthesiology colleagues, and it wouldn't cost any more money. But the reality is it costs Gillette a lot of money to have those have that many employees and not be utilizing them, and that's part of the reason they've struggled so desperately. You'll see the same thing, I'm sure, at Casper at Wyoming Medical Center now the banner's taken over, would be my guess. But so there's all that aside. I am and have been looking to come back to Wyoming because I love Wyoming. It's where my heart is. I'm in negotiations to come back to Wyoming, but honestly, this bill and the supervision bill makes me think, why bother coming back to Wyoming as a CRNA because I'm absolutely free in Montana to do the exact same things I'd be doing in Wyoming. And so that's my piece. I don't think I do think that everybody did bring up good and valid points, but I think the elephant in the room is this question of economic fairness and also the question of economic viability. It's already, the hospitals want to spend more money because there's this fear that's pushed into administration and surgeons that they are somehow taking on some sort of liability with the CRNA that they're not with an MDA. And it's simply not true. There's no case law that bears that out. Anyhow, I know that was really long, but I really, really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys. I would love to come back to my home state sometime and practice. I'm still looking at that. But then when I saw this bill come up or this licensure question, it disheartened me because, like I said, for the past decade, I haven't talked about this at all in Montana because it's a non-issue. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We need to get you a Wyoming cowboy scrub hat there. One quick question, actually two. We got to make them quick. We need to work it. Go ahead. Senator McLuhan, go ahead.
I'm listening to all the testimony, Mr. Chairman, I'm listening to all the testimony today, and I feel like we're getting put into a position to run a hospital and make decisions on how hospitals run. This is simply just another tool in the toolkit. I own grocery stores. I have people in the stores that cut meat. I have people that operate a cash register. And I know you think I'm crazy in where I'm going with this, but the guy who cuts meat makes quite a bit more money than the person running the cash register. And what I'm hearing is, I don't understand how an AA and a CRNA make the same amount of money when one has more capability than the other. So as I sit here wrestling with this bill, my question is, are we trying to fix inequitable pay? Are we trying to provide another tool? Are we trying to dictate the hospital what they can hire? I'm going to go back to the free market thing and ask you a question, Senator Pappas. Do you think it's fair that an AA makes as much money as a CRNA?
Senator Pappas.
Mr. Chairman, Senator McEwen, frankly, doesn't matter what I think. I think it's what the market out there dictates. These folks, they have roughly the same amount of, they have a baccalaureate degree, they have 2 years of education after that in their field, roughly the same education. They all have clinical hours. They all have roughly the same things. Yes, the AAs have to be under the supervision of an anesthesiologist. The CRNAs have to be with a surgeon or another physician. But frankly, that's the issue that was just brought up in the last testimony about them working independently. They do in a lot of states. I think it's 19 states. I was actually discussing this with another CRNA from your neck of the woods, and he might be listening in today, Mr. Aaron Hall. And I told him, I says, well, perhaps that's a different bill. Perhaps we ought to join those other states and allow another option in Wyoming. I have no problem looking into that as well. What I have a problem is why are we keeping these people from doing their practice in Wyoming? Why? I don't think I think the reasons that we've heard today, to me, cost effectiveness, the fraud, the protection of patients. We've heard, if all of those were wrong, then why does CMS and TRICARE, and why do they consider them equal practitioners? So I just think that we ought to be able to let them license and have be able to do their practice in Wyoming. There's no reason why we shouldn't. And I agree. I think it's a matter of one profession being threatened by another. That's what I really think it boils down to. We see it all the time. I see it in mine. And so anyhow, I'm going to really quickly go through the bill.
Thank you,
Very
Senator
fast.
Pappas. Let's go ahead and close the public testimony in committee. Let's work a bill. Does somebody want to move the bill? Bill's moved by Senator Bouchard. And we know of one amendment for sure that was brought up on the effective date. Does somebody wish to bring that or another amendment?
Yeah, I can bring that one and another, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, and let the body discuss it. On page 17, line 3, just because there seems like there's some concern and maybe for safety's sake, my amendment would read, instead of 4, no more than 2. I actually only wanted 1, but then I thought over this, let's just put 2 there on for the number that can be supervised.
On line 3.
Roger that, so that they're not running back and forth. And then the second amendment would be on page 26, line 21, changing the effective date or year to 2022.
I believe it was change of month. Well, what January 1st of 22 was
I think it's July, I think I saw, but
January 1st of 22.
Yeah.
Okay, can you just make that amendment one more time and make it clear for us so that
Okay,
Mike
page
can get this down?
17.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go ahead, Senator.
I think those two ought to be two separate amendments.
We can
That's
do
fine.
that.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Let's do the page 7 or 17. Is that correct? Page 17 amendment first. And I believe that was on line 3 to change 4. After then, change 4 to 2, and then in the parentheses 2. Is that correct?
Correct, sir.
Would you like to move that amendment?
I'll move that amendment.
Committee, any comments? Senator Bouchard? Oh, Mike, go ahead, sir.
Just one question for Senator Hutchins. You wanted it to change to 2, but excuse me, you also had the phrase of no more than 2. Would you like that included?
Correct, sir.
Thank you.
Senator Bouchard, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would speak against an amendment like that. I mean, what we have here is we could have a situation in a hospital where there's rooms that are very close together. And I would have to almost ask Mr. Bowley about this, but the supervision that is happening in other states, I mean, it's danger is always anecdotal unless we have data. And I just don't think we have that data. I think this bill is modeled around what they're doing in other states. So when we crank this down to 2, we're going to create an economic situation where a hospital, this doesn't become of value to a hospital. So I think that if, for instance, let's say they had 2 supervisors and they could have 8 working and rotate those shifts, I think that this makes it feasible the way it is. If we crank this down, we're going to make it not an economic function. So I would speak against an amendment to change this.
Further comments, questions? Let's vote on the amendment. All in favor of that amendment to change 4 to 2 in page 17, line 3, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no.
No.
That amendment fails.
All right.
Second amendment, I believe, is on page 26. Is that correct, Senator Hutchins?
Yes, sir.
Line 21, changing the effective date to January 1st, 2022.
Got it.
Senator Bouchard?
Mr. Chairman, I would just like to, we've done this before, or if it could be done or sooner or something to that effect. I mean, if the medical board puts everything together and makes it happen sooner, I would like them to be able to pull the trigger.
Let's actually ask the board what would be preferred, or Senator Pappas, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, if I recall the testimony was January 1st.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
January 1st,
Is that what you said?
2022.
Oh, you didn't say July 1st.
No, I said January.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I misheard. Thank you.
No problem.
Mr. Blondbus, can you comment on it?
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate Senator Bouchard's thinking on that. We, of course, would start working on it right away. But I think practically speaking, it's best to just have that line because then we've got a starting date. We can tell everybody, you can plan on this date, rather than, September 28th or something, we'll pop it out. So I appreciate where you're coming from on that, but I think a set date is probably the best for us.
Okay, further comments, committee? If not, we're voting on that amendment on line 26, on page 26, line 21, changing July 1st, 2021 to January 1st, 2022. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. That amendment passes. Further amendments or comments, committee? Seeing none, let's vote on the bill. Please call roll, Mike.
Excuse me, Senators, this is for Senate File 104. Senator Bouchard.
Aye.
Senator Furphy.
Aye.
Senator Hutchins.
Aye.
Senator McCune.
Aye.
Chairman Baldwin. That bill does pass.
Mike.
Thank you, Senator Pappas. So none of those other comments I made were heard. That's good.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone who testified. Thank you for coming in. And this will be on the floor. Senator Pappas will be shepherding it through. Let's move quickly along. We'll keep Senator Pappas in the hot seat. Senate File 117, which is much shorter. I believe we could do in short order here. Go ahead, Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, and this is a hopefully very short bill. Just a little background. The reason I brought this bill was, if you recall, last year we passed a interstate compact for speech pathologists and audiologists. Okay, and in that compact, with that legislation, we also removed all of the speech pathologists that were certified under the PTSB and put them under the state board. That was an agreement with PTSB. They didn't want to certify folks working in schools or in the health department. And the state board really has jurisdiction over these folks anyhow. So we ended up moving him. Unbeknownst to us, to me, and certainly not the current director, she didn't know what I'm about to tell you, nor did two directors before her, that there were people out there that were licensed way back that did not have the degree to be able to be licensed today. Today, it's required to have a master's degree to be licensed as a speech language pathologist. So when we deleted that ability and made them go over to the state board says, we can't license you. You don't have a master's. Yet these people have been working for 30, 40 years in our districts as a speech pathologist because they were licensed with a master's or with a bachelor's way back. We're talking a handful of people, not very many. We didn't know anything about them. If I would have known, I would have put something in the bill at the time to grandfather those folks in. So that's all this does. So if you look at your bill on page 1, line 14, it simply says a person who held a valid certificate as a speech or hearing specialist issued by the Professional Teaching Standards Board and was employed by the school district to deliver speech language pathology and audiology services on or before July 1st, 2020, that's when we moved them, shall be qualified to be eligible for license by the board as a speech language pathologist, notwithstanding the requirements imposed under paragraphs A, Roman I through 3. That's the one that requires them to have the master's. Any person licensed under this subsection shall only be authorized to practice as a speech language pathologist or audiologist in public school systems or in programs for developmentally disabled developmentally disabled funded by the Department of Health. Basically, those people who PTSD had licensed or had certified and who were certified by them at the time we made that switch. So, and they can't go practice anywhere. They can't open private practice. They can keep doing what they're doing. And then once they retire and their license goes away, we know, but what I did not want to do is legislate people out of a job. And that's what I effectively did by not putting a grandfathering in, and I'm here to correct my error.
I believe you're forgiven, Senator Pappas.
Uh,
Committee, any
So-
questions for Senator Pappas? All right, we got to close, make sure there's no public comment. Do we have any public comment? Senator Salazar, do you want to say something, just to say something? We'll get you soon enough. Amanda, anybody on the public waiting room to hear?
Mr. Chairman, no one has their hand raised at the moment.
Very good. The crowd is following the lead. Okay, Senator Pappas, are you ready to work this bill? Let's close it to comment. Committee, would somebody like to move the bill? Moved by Senator Hutchins and Senator McClung. Everybody moved this bill. Any additions, changes, amendments? Seeing none, let's call the roll on the bill.
Senators, this is for Senate File 117. Senator Bouchard.
Aye.
Senator Furphy. Senator Hutchins. Senator McCune.
Aye.
Chairman Baldwin.
Aye.
That passes.
Thank you, committee.
It's good you could spend the morning with us.
Yeah.
Senator Salazar.
Great to be back with you.
Yeah, don't you wish you were still here? Senator Salazar, we appreciate your patience. I've been watching you pace the halls out there. But as they say, it's not over until the good senator sings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Salazar is going to present to us Senate File 131, Workplace Transparency Act 2. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, honorable members. Workplace transparency, I'll go through the bill. It's a 4-page bill. It's absolutely straightforward. That's why it's 4 pages. What this bill does, it's a privacy bill. What this bill does is 2 things and 2 things only. First, it prohibits an employer from barring an employee from disclosing their wage information. So typically when someone is beginning employment, the employer will ask them to sign a waiver saying that at the water fountain, they cannot talk about their salary with other employees. What this bill does is simply says the employer cannot demand that from an employee. That's all it does. The second thing this bill does is it states that an employer cannot ask a new employee for their previous salary history as a determining factor in what they will be paid in their new job. And that is all it does. I would refer you though to page 2. If you look at page 2, line 7, this bill is dealing specifically with only companies, businesses with 50 employees or more. 50 employees or more. I know that there are those, and perhaps some may even testify today, why are we giving this privacy protection to companies over 50 but not under 50? And that's a good question. I will leave it up to your committee or to others in the audience who feel that maybe an amendment would be needed to protect all citizens, not just businesses over 50 employees. And that really is the sum of the bill. It's a straightforward 2-part bill. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for any questions.
Questions, committee. Senator Hutchins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Salazar, just real quickly. The question is this happening a lot? I mean, I'm old. I've been around for a while and I don't ever remember talking to people about my wages and or being asked to not tell someone what I'm being paid. What's the big deal about this bill, if you don't mind?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hutchins.
Go ahead.
That is allowable in Wyoming. It is allowable in Wyoming, and quite frankly, you've been fortunate and blessed that has not occurred to you. But in other areas, employers have that ability to have an employee sign that. And so, again, this is simply a privacy bill, that you shouldn't have to give that information on salaries. And why should you be gagged from talking about your salary to other employees?
Further questions, committee? Senator McEwen.
I have one question for you, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
I believe I'm a conflict on this.
Go ahead and explain that to the committee.
I'm an employer of over 50 people. Would that put me into conflict?
I would believe so, yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Salazar's got something he wants to say.
No, I have nothing to say, Mr. Chairman. But I'd like to make room if there's anyone who has any testimony.
Yeah, we'll get there. Let's get,
okay.
You're not done yet. Don't
Okay,
be running
sir.
away. Senator.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Bouchard, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So can you tell me specifically of a problem? I mean, even if you don't mention any names or anything, just specifically how this is being used?
I don't have, Mr. Chairman, Senator Bouchard, I don't have a specific instance where I could relate the situation. But currently in the state of Wyoming, an employer can ask a new employee to sign a document that would gag them from talking about their wage to another employee. Also, under Wyoming law right now, they can ask for previous salary history. And what this bill does is says you cannot use that or ask that for a determining factor on what I'm going to pay you. And so again, it is a straight and simple privacy issue when it comes to that information.
Follow up, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So here's where I'm having the little twist here. So let's say I make $50 an hour and I want to say, hey, here it is. Here's where I made $50 an hour because I want to make another $50 an hour. Doesn't that kind of,
yeah.
I want to make sure that we're not
Mr. Chairman,
overthinking this.
Go ahead, Senator Salazar.
This does not preclude the employee from sharing that information voluntarily. So I want to make that clear. You can voluntarily give that information to a potential employer. They just cannot force you to give it. But if it's a practice of negotiation, you have that right to give that information out.
Go ahead, Senator Furby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me give an example. And as an employer, okay, you're looking at candidates and you've got someone, unbeknownst to you, that was making a six-figure salary before. They have a MBA and all this. Now they're, just because they're in between jobs, they're willing to take a low five-figure job. That's not necessarily fair to the employer because guess what? That employee is not going to be there for very long, and the employer sort of needs to know that when he's looking at candidates. I just use that as an example. Do you see concerns there?
Senator Salazar.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Furphy, I understand that. My only comment would be that will always be the case. There will always be a chance that an employee, for whatever reason, whether it's lowballing the salary, whether it's this is the only job I could find right now, whether it's I'm going to get a better offer a year from now, an employer is always going to have that chance that the employee And I think what you're looking for is kind of security of that employees are going to stay. And I will say this bill does not in any way preclude you from having the employee sign an employment agreement for however many years you and that other individual decide you want to be in contract with. This is simply dealing specifically with the privacy issue and the ability, I guess, in some way of a First Amendment free speech to talk to fellow employees at the water cooler about what you're making. So, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. No further questions. Oh, Senator Bouchard.
So I'm just trying to make sure, Mr. Chairman, just trying to make sure that we're just not going on too many sides here, because I'm looking right here. It says, so on page 3, line 14, please explain this to me, where it says rely on the salary history information of a prospective employee as a factor in determining whether to offer employment. So I'm trying to give me a real life view of that right there so I can understand.
Well, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Senator Salazar.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Bouchard. So take, for instance, you have a new employee coming in. The employer says, what's your salary history? What other jobs have you done? And give me the salary that you've been making in those previous jobs. All with the intent of deciding what the salary will be with this new specific job. What this bill simply says is you cannot be forced to give that salary history to your new employee as a determining factor in what you're going to be paid, that you don't have to give it. However, you can voluntarily give that information if you want to. And quite frankly, if I had a master's or a PhD, I'd probably very voluntarily give that information for the specific purpose of getting as much as I could for my family. So there is a release valve for protecting the employer with regard to that, but there is a privacy issue if you don't want to give that information.
Oh, the hands up, Senator Bouchard.
Just one follow-up, Mr. Chairman, and I want to just tell you my mindset when I ran business is a little bit different than most people. So I was always looking for the person that wanted my job. That way I could go do something else while they ran the position that I had. So you understand this kind of hamstrings me, because if I can't find that guy that wants, I want the guy that had the paycheck to prove that he could do what he needed to do. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. And then all of a sudden now I can't even ask. So, and like I said, my mindset's different. Most people in management positions, they don't want anybody coming and taking them off of the perch. I was always looking for I'd tell all my people, come into work and take my spot from me. Okay. Work as hard as you can, because I'll go open another business or do something else. So I'm just looking at this from that free market approach. And so I'm a little bit worried, could we maybe do something? We need to do something in here for guys like me that are looking for the best CEO. Go ahead, Senator Salazar.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Bouchard, and I think if I were in your seat, I think there's nothing that precludes you from saying to that individual, as you negotiate across the table or talk on the phone, I'm looking for a replacement for myself. I'm looking for someone who's interested in doing my job, and I'm going to go fishing the rest of the week. Are you willing to tell me everything that you want to tell me for that, to take my position? And I will be honest with you, this is a balancing act between that versus the privacy issue. And so that is the genesis of what this is about. But I personally don't believe, Senator Bouchard, that this would preclude you from asking those questions if they wanted to voluntarily do it. And if I were the employee, the potential employee, where you said that to me, I would want to give you all the information I possibly had so I could take your job.
Mm.
But that would be me. So.
Very good. Senator Hutchins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I look at this bill, I don't think about how much money someone's making per se. What I'm looking for as an employer is your qualifications, your KSAs, your skills, your knowledge and your ability to do the job. Whether you want to make my take my six-figure position or just working or not, it shouldn't matter. It's my ability, like you said, freedom of speech, and also Article 1, Section 20 of the Wyoming Constitution, that we have freedom of speech and press, and we can talk about anything. So the pay isn't the issue here.
Right.
It's just your ability to speak or not speak, and your ability to hold back if you don't want to reveal information. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is that correct?
Senator Salazar.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hutchins, absolutely correct. That is exactly what we're getting at here. So.
Further questions, committee? If not, let's move to the public. Anyone wish to come forward? I see Representative Conley. I see your name on the bill. I suspect this is in support of the bill. Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Yes, I came over here to see what good work the Senate was doing and to support my colleague. So on and in favor of this bill. This is a bill that I'd like you to consider to be incredibly business friendly. And as we move forward into the 21st century, that we include in our statutes best practices. This is a best practice. Over and over again, we have seen, as we've looked at, how do we diversify our economy? Who do we bring in? What do they expect to see? This is one of the elements. And I'd just like to kind of address the questions that I heard right now, and I'd be happy to go back to other ones. On the page 3, the subsection E, and it started with good. I almost said Representative Furphy, but Senator Furphy's question, and followed up by Senator Bouchard about the reliance on salary history. And I'd like to suggest, in going to actually Senator Hutchins, that asking the salary history, if you flipped it, instead of thinking of Senator Furphy's, knowing that somebody made a 6-figure salary would be valuable if this was a mid 5-digit salary. What if you flipped it around and the person had been at one of those positions where they were making $50,000 and they're applying for a job that may be $80,000 and did it for whatever reason, right? Whatever reason, they were between jobs, had family issues that they were taking care of, needed a position at a lower level. The obligation to say that salary, right? The obligation to respond to that question, lowballs, right? Lowballs their KSAs, their knowledge and skills, right? And could telegraph to a Senator Bouchard, this is not a position, this is not a person who wants my position. I make 6 figures, all right? They made 50,000, they've got a long way to go before they can take over mine. Instead, this allows the person to stand on their KSA and that interview, right? If they want to tell you, that's totally fine, but don't obligate them to. Let them sell themselves to you. Let them sell them that they're going to take your job, right? Not based on a $40,000 or $50,000 salary that they had made in their last position for whatever reason. So in general, this is a bill that is about First Amendment rights, and we've had that kind of discussion about the ability for people to talk about their salaries without being afraid that they're going to be fired. We know as employers it already happens, right? So just we all understand that, right? But also, again, this is a best business practice, and let's just put it in our statutes and show that we're in the 21st century. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative. Thank you. I would tell the committee that we're going to run out of time. I've got some more testimony. Quick questions. Go ahead, Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, those were some pretty hard generalizations. I worked commission most of my life. People that I hired were working commission. People that had to meet deadlines. Those are very important issues when you're bringing those people in. And it's not, well, you can't get that data from without the figures that we're talking about. So that's where I'm having a problem here. And I'm kind of offended that we're just throwing that around loosely, because the people that I'm hearing things from, possibly people that haven't run those kind of businesses and had the experience on that end, telling me that the questions that I can and can't ask as a business owner. So that's where I'm having a problem here. So, I mean, think about what I'm saying here. People that work commission have to deal with numbers, and it's driving that force. Nothing happens until something is sold in those kind of positions. And before I was even in a sales position, I worked where I had to work with my hands, and I had to actually complete so many jobs. And you're actually, that as a technician that's paid commission, it's basically how much can you turn. So these are numbers that I'm a little worried that we would cripple some businesses that have to do with those numbers by not asking those questions. So so how do you come back at that? How do we get to that number when we don't know, we're not able to ask these things when they're all based on that sales number?
Representative Conley.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Senator Bouchard. My answer to that would be, I think as an interviewer, that you would ask very pointed questions about how the applicant worked in terms of commission. Those are the kinds of questions that I would ask, and about their experience in a commissioned kind of position. That would be my response. And also to know that other states that have comparable kinds of statutes have not experienced the debilitating effects that you're implying could happen. And so honestly, it is perceived as a best practice in general.
Thank you, Representative Conley. Senator Furphy.
Thank you. Here's a situation that I would be concerned with in this bill. If you have an employee that's dealing with a lot of money, so what you want to do is pull a credit report, making sure they've not filed bankruptcy, they're into debt up to their ears, and be tempted to take money from the business. Those credit reports show their salary history. So if you're requiring a credit report, you're going to know their history, but you've got to have that information if you're going to hire them. I would ask how you would deal with that matter. Thank you.
Yeah.
Representative.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senator Furphy. I haven't thought about credit reports. Honestly, I'd have to get back to you on that one. Yeah.
Okay. I believe that we've got some testimony on screen. I will forewarn you, we're going to have a choice here. We can take some quick testimonies, like 2 minutes each, and work the bill, or we're going to have to hold off on voting on this until Monday. Committee, what's your preference? Would you rather hear these now? It's 9:53, 20% humidity, 23 degrees centigrade right now. Would you rather do this now, or would you rather come back and finish this up on Monday?
I vote for Monday. There's obviously people who want to speak.
Yeah, and I don't want to limit the people who want to speak, and that's problematic. Let's finish this bill up. If that's agreeable with the testifiers on screen, and shake your head or hold your thumbs up, or would you be able to come back Monday morning first thing, and we'll finish this up and do the vote on it if that's fine. We'll call this meeting to a close now, and we'll be back and we'll vote on this, Senator Salazar, Monday morning. Thank you for coming.